Hey everyone, on this week's Trade to Black podcast, we break down the big announcement that took place in British Columbia this week, where the province announced that it's going to decriminalize the possession of hard drugs that include fentanyl, opioids, MDMA, and cocaine. You're now legally going to be allowed to possess 2.5 grams anywhere in the province. Why? To combat the ongoing drug crisis that the province is enduring. Is this a good idea? Find out now in our latest podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Trade to Black podcast. I am your host, Shadd Dales, and as usual, before we get started, all views on the Trade to Black podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or our guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Welcoming in our lead financial writer, Benjamin A. Smith. Ben, great to have you. How was your week?
Great week. Great way to finish it off with Payton Nyquvest on the show. So I'm doing well.
Yes. Joining us this week, our guest of the week here in the podcast, the CEO of Numinus Wellness, Payton Nyquvest. Welcome back. I know you're a regular here with us here at TDR. How was the week?
Week was good. Exciting times out of British Columbia.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's begin with that. So obviously a lot of people know about this announcement and wanted to have you on to just kind of break it down. But this week, province in which you reside in, Payton, which is British Columbia in Canada, where government officials made headlines by announcing that the province will decriminalize small amounts of simple drug possessions. They include drugs like cocaine, fentanyl, opioids, MDMA. This all in an effort to ramp up its response in recent years to the drug crisis in the province that's been killing thousands of people. So I want to begin with that, Payton, and the problem itself. This is a big announcement. So I'd like to get an idea with you living there. How severe is this crisis right now in BC?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the overdose statistics, especially in light of COVID, across North America, and I think we can collectively agree that we're not doing a good job of treating drug addiction. British Columbia in particular, the downtown east side is probably one of the worst in North America, if not the world, in terms of a dense population of people severely suffering with opiate addiction in particular, but drug addiction. So it's a huge step for regulators to start to look at new models and new ways of trying to solve this crisis.
What's been the general response been so far with some of the people that you've spoken to?
I mean, it's extremely positive. If you look, I don't know if you guys know about the Portugal model or not, but Portugal went through kind of a similar thing. But if you look at the statistics since Portugal went through that, I mean, it's been huge. And I think we're finally seeing this mindset shift around, treating drug addiction as a criminal activity instead of a mental health issue. And, you've seen this sort of failing of the war on drugs over the last, large number of years. And with moving it into the healthcare system, we can actually get solution based, and I think this is a huge step. And when you think about drug addiction in particular, one of the big things as well is you've got to start with breaking down the stigma and starting to give people a chance to have a conversation. And when things are made illegal, you drive underground activity where people are not feeling safe to be able to have the conversation, not feeling safe to be able to actually reach out for support because of the legal status. So we start to move it into the healthcare system and starting to look at how do we actually get to the root of addiction in the first place. And I think this is a huge step in order to get there.
Ben, you want to add to that? What was your thoughts of it all?
Yeah, a couple things to add here. What do you say to, I don't know if right wing is right, the right terminology, but people on the right who think that decriminalizing or legalizing drugs, even in small amounts, is detrimental to patient care just because they have access to it, whereas they shouldn't. And also, I was curious to know whether we actually have is enough time elapsed that we have real-time data in the Portugal model to really go off of to prove conclusively that their model works and that some amount of legalization is actually gets patient rates down.
I think the Portugal, and I'm not, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that was 2001 where they made that change. So, we're looking at a pretty good stretch of time, and in that period of time, they've seen criminal activity and arrests go. I think it was 40% of arrests that were made, have been brought down to 15%. Their overdose and addiction rates are by far the lowest in the EU at the moment. This didn't come because Portugal just rolled over and had a good idea. At the time when they made this decision, it was because Portugal was really having a serious issue with drug addiction. So I think we've seen that. And I think, you've even seen, obviously, more recently, Oregon is going through a similar sort of path at the moment. So I think you're seeing that support for that. I think you're going to see more and more data. I think Health Canada has taken a measured approach. This isn't, the doors are open. They're going to do this for about 3 years and reassess. But I think what Portugal's also done is they've been able to divert. If you think about, the weight of drug addiction on the criminal system, I think it's something like 80% of possession charges are under, I think it's under the 2.5 or 5 gram limit. So when you remove that, you're able to actually divert some of those resources. And this is what Portugal did that was a brilliant idea, is they started to divert the resources that they were spending on making arrests and all that comes with that. And they actually moved it towards actual rehabilitation. And so to be able to start to take those resources and focus them on solution-based orientation versus, okay, we're going to arrest somebody and to the point of, making them legal so that people or the fear of making them legal and around accessibility, nobody's having an issue finding drug supply at the moment. And this isn't, we're decriminalizing them and then we're opening up, cocaine stores on every block in British Columbia, but it is opening things up in terms of not having to have the amount of resources that get poured into making arrests, putting people into an environment which frankly probably makes the addiction worse, not better. To put somebody in jail and into a system that doesn't breed rehabilitation, right? It continues to make things worse.
So 2.5 grams is now the legal possession, correct?
Correct.
So when you look at this, you're saying a lot less dollars dedicated towards people arresting and actually building rehabilitation programs. What do you think will be the rollout plan over the next 3 years based off of that information? Like, what are some of the things that you could see that will take place in the province?
I mean, again, I think the first thing is to break down stigma and start to look at more solution-based orientation. And I think, talking about obviously where we've been focusing around psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is we start to focus on what are the things that are creating addiction in the first place, right? Is it, you look at trauma, you look at mental health issues. We've got to start diverting the resources towards addressing the problem, which is mental health. And so I think, we haven't seen yet in terms of what the actual financial plan from Health Canada is going to be. But, we are fortunate enough to live in a country that has a universal healthcare system and prioritizes, accessible treatments for people. So the hope is we're going to continue to see more and more support for mental health services and financial support.
I got to ask this question to both of you. I was reading the mayor of Vancouver, Kennedy Stewart, who receives weekly updates on overdose deaths in the city, was informed by the federal minister of mental health and later outlined, quote, "I feel like crying and I still feel like crying, end quote. This is a big, big thing. So what was your reaction, Payton, when you heard this news? Because I don't want to say people don't understand, but this is a huge announcement for the overall better quality of stepping in the right direction for mental health that I think more people need to talk about.
Yeah. On a personal note, I grew up in a household that struggled with substance use disorder,
Yeah.
and even for my own mental well-being, my mom in particular, her sobriety when I was in my teens actually sparked my interest in taking care of my own mental health. So, it's helping one person with mental health issues. It's not a 1+1=2 sort of thing. The ripple effect of one person dealing with their mental health could save a family, could save the multiple people that are around people who struggle with substance use disorders. And typically you hear this a lot, but addiction is a, they call it a family disease, and it's because of the impact that it has not only on the individual but the amount of people that are trying to support that person.
Ben, like, I'll get your response too. Like, how big do you think this announcement was? And, maybe not short term, but long term, what kind of impact do you think this will have on the overall industry as a whole?
I'm pretty optimistic it's going to have a good impact. And, as Payton said, there's a lot of data going back to the Portugal model dating back to 2001. I actually didn't think it went back that far. I thought it was a little bit, perhaps last decade. But if there's that much research into it, clearly a lot of jurisdictions show that there's a lot of good outcomes that come from it. We keep people out of the hospital, out of the jails, and out of places that they shouldn't be, and focus on rehabilitation. And if programs are centered towards that, I think it's nothing but a good thing, because you keep people out of harmful situations, detrimental environments, and focus on rehabilitation. And if it's structured right, I think it's a good decision by our government.
How's this advance? I think, like, when you look at the industry, Payton, and maybe more specifically your company, but how does this advance, I guess, your company in helping address the need for mental health?
I would really echo the stigma or the way we think about drug use. It's interesting when you look at psychedelics, whether psilocybin, LSD. What's been proven in research, and in particular over the last number of years, is they're extremely safe from a drug user standpoint. There's no lethal dose of psilocybin. There's no lethal dose of LSD.
Yeah.
Even there was a story of a woman who took something like 50 times the regular dose of LSD by accident, and other than having a very long and challenging couple of days, she actually struggled with I believe it was a lighter version of schizophrenia, and it ended up actually curing her mental health issues. So, when we think about these drugs that are scheduled, right alongside cocaine, opiates, and you think about opiates in particular, where you can go to a doctor, you can go to a hospital, and you can get prescribed opiates, right? And we all know the potential for very serious ramifications with those drugs. I think it starts to break down that conversation and gives people a bit of a different lens in regards to you can't basket all of these drugs in the same category. And I think it changes our viewpoint a little bit on how these drugs are also being used. So I think that's a big step forward. I think if you look at what Health Canada has done here in the last couple of years, starting with the Section 56 exemptions, now the changes to the Special Access Drug Program, now this change, I think you're at the very, very beginning of a very large change in regards to how we look at drug use, and in particular the regulation side of that. And when I think about the psychedelic industry, the thing that we've continued to see over and over and over again is you're seeing psychedelics potentially be successful for a number of different indications. And I think that's saying something in regards to just not only the effectiveness, but even how they're used and, you know, the support that's needed. And I'd love to see, frankly, more research dollars coming in from the government. I think when we think about the accessibility issue, that's really where, you know, industry should be supporting. Industry should be supporting.
Yeah.
How do we build models that are sustainable? And from a research side of things, because there's, you know, such limited opportunity around patenting or owning drugs, the research side of things, you know, I'd love to see more financial support coming from the government and let industry figure out how we actually deal with the issues around accessibility and scalability.
Now, Payton, I want to ask you this, getting back to the safety thing that you were just talking about. Myself and Shadd interviewed Christian Angermayer a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about the biotech industry at length and psychedelic biotech. And he was convinced that the safety profile of psilocybin and most of these psychedelic compounds is very, very secure because, you know, there's data going back to the 1950s and so forth. So I want to get your take on whether you share that viewpoint yourself, whether you are convinced, because obviously there's a lot of upcoming trials. Phase 2s are mostly in phase 2 right now, then the phase 3s after that. And there's a lot of trial risk on the safety side. So in your opinion, are psychedelic compounds, particularly psilocybin and ketamine, are these safe compounds? And do you think that they'll go the distance in terms of the safety profile?
I couldn't agree more in regards to the safety profile. And we have data to prove that. And, you know, I think when you think about drug scheduling, so Schedule 1, the two big things that land you in Schedule 1 is usually propensity for abuse, and so addiction, and the potential for harm. So with psychedelics, we've seen very, very low abuse profile and extremely, extremely safe. So why they're still sitting in Schedule 1 is I think needs to be addressed very, very quickly. But I agree. I think we've seen that they're extremely safe. I think in terms of regulation, the thing that I would love to see, and I think Oregon has done a phenomenal job, is they're prioritizing the actual therapeutic use of these compounds, because I think the thing that I would be concerned about is if we just go to, and I'm a supporter of, I think there needs to be a new regulatory environment. Things like the decriminalization movement I think are important, but I don't want us to miss the therapeutic potential and benefit of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And, you know, as human beings, you know, we've displayed over and over and over again that we can sometimes get a little too busy or incensed in how do we get access to drugs as quickly and easily as possible. And I think, you know, you look at MDMA. MDMA was actually originally created as a psychotherapy tool, and there was hundreds of thousands of MDMA assisted psychotherapy sessions that happened in the US before MDMA actually made its way into a Dallas nightclub and then was scheduled. But a lot of these compounds, you know, MDMA in particular, was actually originally created for psychotherapy. And so I think we've seen the safety
re-education,
profile.
is it not?
It's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's exactly right.
Do you still believe, and I know we've had this conversation in the past, that MDMA, I know MAPS has come out and publicly said that they think it's going to be the next psychedelic compound to be legalized as early as next year. I had this conversation with another interview earlier this week, but do you still believe that's on course to potentially happen in 2023 and MDA will be that next compound approved?
I would say yes, with the caveat that the psilocybin at the moment is in a very unique regulatory category, and I do think that there's the potential for
why do you believe that?
I think, you know, MDMA, because MDMA one is a synthesized, you know, molecule that's created in a lab. And with the path that MAPS started, MAPS has been bringing MDMA through the FDA clinical trial process for 35 years. So there's sort of a path that's already forged there, pre a lot of the regulatory movement that we've seen in regards to obviously cannabis and now other psychedelic compounds. So I think MDMA is going to go sort of that traditional drug approval process. I think I think the call it the genie's out of the bottle a little bit now in regards to how much interest and how much excitement and optimism there is around psilocybin as a tool to deal with mental health issues. And I also think there's this issue around from a drug pharma standpoint, there's no profit to be made on trying to control the actual product. It's a naturally occurring compound. There's no IP or patents to be derived around the actual product itself. And so I think that lends itself to a regulatory change that's a little more conducive to being able to provide accessibility. And I think, again, Oregon legalizing psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy and the path that they've taken, I think you could see more of that. California, from what we've seen, looks probably like the next state to go that route. And you've seen a lot of support from Health Canada as well.
Now, Novamind, this past week, they reported their fiscal Q3 2022 financial results. The top line looked really good, 3.23 million, 32% jump over the previous quarter. Sequentially, 13 locations now available. So my question to you with that is, what is your take on the earnings? Were they in line with what you expected? And also, if MDMA or another compound is legalized or for therapeutic use, can the clinics at Novamind, can they switch over fairly rapidly to start dispensing MDMA therapy whenever it's legalized down the road?
Yeah, it's a great question. To the first point was actually pleasantly surprised. Obviously, we were pretty up to speed in terms of what those numbers were going to look like, but I think what Novamind has demonstrated is not only strong revenue, but especially in the environment we're in right now, revenue is great. Profitability is what's necessary, and I think Novamind's been able to demonstrate a path towards that, and so we're really excited about closing off that acquisition and having them being a part of the team. In terms of transitioning or being able to be amendable to other psychedelic compounds when they become legalized, it's the other big thing why Novamind was such a great fit for us was similarly to what we've built in Canada. They're currently doing research with a number of different compounds. They're the sites for a bunch of psilocybin research. They're one of the sites for the MindMed LSD research. So they've been on the front line with a number of these different compounds as well, and the clinics have been built to be able to facilitate that change as well. So it's really a phenomenal platform for us to be utilizing as we step into the US, and we're quite excited about it.
Yeah. We look at society about being re-educated on mental health. When I look at this industry from a capital markets perspective, I think it's fair to say, let's address where we're at. I think from a capital markets perspective, this industry got out to probably a quicker start than what it should have been. Now that we're kind of sitting here and where we are today, you're looking at the next kind of stage as to what companies are actually building their footprint and how it's starting to make place. But saying all this, and we factor in potentially, legalization of the next compound, what do you guys both think is the big next monumental moment for this industry to get more people back reinterested within this space as to where it was, let's say, 12 to 18 months ago?
Go for it, Ben.
Yeah, I guess I'll take that one first. I've had this debate with some people, some very knowledgeable people in the industry, and I'm not convinced that it's going to be one event. Getting back to last year, I think everybody thought that event could happen with Compass Pathways. I know we have a lot of conversations with industry executives, and there's a lot of hope that because they had the most advanced research, phase 2Bs, psilocybin widely followed, that they could set the agenda for the rest of the sector. And of course, the results were good. Obviously, they have some, potential concerns mixed in with some safety things, but that's not, not unheard of with the type of people, patients and the issues that they had. But, it could be a critical mass. It may not just be one particular event. So I think, all these little great pieces of news that come out, all these small studies, the things that Numinus are doing, I think, it's quite possible that it's just a critical mass effect that galvanizes people over time, as opposed to, one phase 3 study or one phase 2B study that crystallizes the whole sector that everybody thought would happen last year.
Yeah.
Payton, I see you agreeing with that. You want to add to that?
I completely agree. And, it's always interesting. The markets, I usually say more often than not, aren't necessarily in line with reality. And when I remove myself from, what's happening in the markets at the moment, and I focus on everything else that's happening within the psychedelic space, and again, you hate to play opportunists of really a terrible situation. But if you think about what's going on in regards to mental health, there's not a mental health indication at the moment that isn't increasing. We're not doing a good job. I spent this whole week with a lot of our therapists, and the therapists continue to say, look, like you're selling ice cream in an inferno right now in regards to people looking for therapists, looking for mental health support. So you've got a massive addressable need and no solution, and frankly no innovation in the last 50 years. It's absolutely ripe for disruption. It's huge, and to the point where,
isn't it amazing?
It's
sorry to cut you off. I just think it's amazing because I can't think of another industry that has the total addressable market, that has demand going through the roof. Metrics are still, there's more increasing patient need, and yet the market is sectors tamped down just because of other extraneous issues, right? I've never seen anything like it. Usually with that demand, with that addressable market, things would be going
exactly.
through the roof.
I mean, it's baffling. I mean, and just to continue on that point is not only that, but we actually have a system called the healthcare system that it could fit into. And we have insurance providers in Canada. We have universal healthcare system. Like there's so many, the potential for this space is so large. And it was interesting, and you hate to draw parallels to the cannabis space, but when the cannabis space first started in Canada, the big question was like, is cannabis going to actually become legal or not going to become legal? If you talk to anybody about psychedelics, it's like this foregone conclusion that this is happening. It's happening right now. You've seen Health Canada make changes. You've seen states in the US make changes. So the change is happening, and there's a massive addressable need there. I think to Ben's point around critical mass, and again, if I step away from looking at the capital markets, the amount of just general public interest and support for this is so large and continuing to grow. You think about cultural shifts, you think about psychedelics in pop culture. My wife said to me the other day, she was shopping online at Zara or something like that, and there's a whole line of clothing that has like psychedelic mushrooms on it. You've seen this just massive cultural shift in support of this. And so when I sit there as an operator, I couldn't be more excited for the what I believe is a massive tidal wave of support. And I think we were talking a little bit about this before the show took off, but we threw an event in LA called Music is Medicine, and it was really to try and draw some awareness and support around mental health and psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And this was just strictly an awareness and concert event. The event was sold out almost immediately. We had a huge amount of interest, and there's just anywhere you see this pop up, the amount of support is massive. So I think in terms of what changes it, from a macro event standpoint, I think psychedelics are a little bit of the baby thrown out with the bathwater. The biotech healthcare space has just been hammered over the last couple of years. It's worst performing sector. So I do think you need to see just the more broad biotech healthcare space start to improve, which I do think it does. I think one of the things
I think it does too.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're very excited about, and the way that we position the company is, you hear a lot of conversation about recession and stuff like that. if you look at the stats on mental health services, which we provide, those services stay the same or increase during things like a recession or challenging times. So I do think that's going to create a unique opportunity to highlight the importance of mental health services, and hopefully that gets recognized in the market.
Yeah, this is something that we've been discussing, and I think in a lot of ways anticipating is that once the dust settled related to COVID, you're going to see the impact. And I think you're starting to see that now, because as much as people were getting checks during COVID, that tap has been turned off. I look at the market right now. Guys like Elon Musk are making news about how they're making a worldwide hiring freeze. Some of the stuff I noticed this week, the price to earning ratio right now in the S&P 500 has fallen to what the P ratio was at the height of the tech bubble back in 2001. Like, there's a lot of people still saying that we could fall as much as 20 to 30% more. So when people aren't seeing the money coming in and inflation at an all-time high, it creates big time awareness and need for this industry, to say the least. What's your take right now on, being a former research analyst for Mackey and Canaccord? I would like to get your thoughts, and where do you think we are right now with the overall economy?
I think there's certainly challenging times ahead in regards to the market. In regards to the conversation around recession, I think we've been in one. To say it's sort of coming, I think we're kind of there. In regards, just speaking about our industry, as if you pull a lot of the stats currently, the large majority of healthcare biotech companies are already trading at or below, cash at the moment. So I think in terms of sectors, I don't think the sector can get beat up very much more. I think in terms of
this small cap space, I'm just like, recession. Like, we feel like we've been in this for probably over a year, right?
Yeah. So I think in regards to our space,
it's a double whammy.
100%. I think in regards to our space, my personal opinion is I think it's going to be one of the leaders coming out of this. But I do think, I think probably challenging times are ahead, and in terms of, opportunity, I think, anytime you see moments like this is where there's big opportunity. And if you look, so you got to prioritize companies that have cash, revenue, and profitability. I think the shift has gone from how do you generate as much revenue as possible to how do you show a path to profitability, or how do you demonstrate profitability as quickly as possible?
Like, Ben, aren't these entry points when you look at what Payton just outlined? And again, and even Christian that outlined this a couple of weeks with us, is like the companies that are cashed up, that have a long runway, that have a diversified portfolio, and then you look at the world as a whole and what we're currently in and the aftermath of what's left behind. Again, if this industry wasn't public, it was private, it would probably be the greatest times, with this industry and how much progress that it's made. But does this opportunity within this space not still sit front and center, knowing what the long-term growth trajectory looks like?
I think so. Yeah, I would say yes. I would say particularly now as well, for several reasons. First of all, you have the XBI, which we've talked about with Christian and previously. It's been absolutely killed. Like, just bring up a chart. The fall from the highs. Granted, it went probably higher than it was extended like other industries, but the fall from the high is something we've never seen. Like, it's down 60% over the past 7-8 months, and it's just been hammered. And then you have small caps, which are trading at some of the lowest valuations in history, actually, like 10, 11 times price to earnings. So the psychedelic sector has been at the forefront of that, because not only are they small caps and micros, it's also biotech and risky biotech that hasn't been really proven. So it's been that double whammy, and it's but obviously the price decline creates a lot of opportunity, and like Christian said, a lot of companies trading for below cash right now. And also, I think that we're at the stage that now we've matured enough where over the past 5-6 quarters, it's no longer, it's more of a certainty. Like, we have companies like Awaken Life Sciences, they're going into phase 3 this year. We have Compass Pathways. very good phase 2B results. Obviously, still a couple safety concerns, but I think they're going to go the distance. They're going into phase 3 right now. So the sector is maturing from just a phase 2 sector and only a handful of companies in there to now 2 companies are going into phase 3. And once you go into phase 3, then obviously, in a year to 2 years, we're going to know more about the safety and efficacy profile. And I'm very optimistic that it's
Payton, what are some of the questions that you're having and communicating with your investor base right now? Like some of the questions that they ask?
I think the big thing we continue to hear over and over again is how does this scale? What does this look like post approval? What does this sort of infrastructure look like? Who's going to pay for it? Those are probably the biggest questions that we get. But I'll tell you, like I don't get any phone calls from people, questioning about the sector, we have the fortune and misfortune of being one of the first to go public. We've been involved in the space for a very, very long time.
Right.
We've seen, we saw the first, initial excitement, then we saw the first initial sort of crash in the space, then you saw another, moment of optimism and excitement, and now obviously we've been back to where we are today. And I think the thing that we heard when we were in this situation probably 2 years ago around this time, the big conversation was, is this going to be an industry or not? I don't hear any of those questions anymore.
Exactly. That's a
good point.
So I think and agreeing with Christian, focusing on who's got the cash to be able to get through it and continue to execute, and who's got a clear sort of business model and pathway when approval is there already. And we're fortunate enough to be able to be in both categories. And I think in terms of some of those questions, I think they're easy to answer. And for most people, it's sort of weathering the storm that we're in and picking good opportunities.
Now, my last question over here, Payton, is I know obviously the sector is way down, as we've just discussed, but obviously that also creates opportunity for companies that have a nice balance sheet, to have enough cash to capitalize on some of the distressed assets out there. So that being said, are you looking at perhaps acquiring? Are you looking at different companies and pieces that can be accretive to your business model? Seeing that some of the distressed assets out there are quite plentiful with a lot of these companies.
For sure, looking at opportunities that are out there. The Novamind one, which we've talked about, was such a massive opportunity for us. I think there's other ones that are out there. I don't think we necessarily need to be in a rush. I think some of those assets are either going to get cheaper or stay the same price. But also, I think, while it was very exciting and encouraging and we were able to raise a lot of capital during the last run where things were very exciting for the space, I think it did get very, very overcrowded and oversaturated. And the thing that I'm also excited about in regards to this you weed things out a little bit, and you see dollars get prioritized towards things that have the best chance at success, and really get focused. And so that's one of the things that we're excited about too, is we've seen people reprioritize capital towards the things of most importance. And I think we could collectively agree the thing most important is how do we meet this massive addressable need, and how do we do it in the most efficient way possible?
Yeah, good place to be in, a good situation to be in, knowing that, if you are, like I said, one of the first companies to go public, cashed up, and at the same time too, if you've got people approaching you, it's a time now where actually you can be really selective and enhance your overall portfolio at, probably in a lot of cases at a very cost-effective price to expand, something that obviously investors should be looking at and asking these questions when entering this space. Hey, look, if you ever want to resign as a CEO, you're more than welcome to come on here every week as a guest, because you've been incredible as usual. But great information. We both appreciate the feedback. As usual, Ben, great questions. And wish you guys obviously a great rest of your weekend. And let's keep in touch.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, wait until you see what we have next. Some of the best thought leaders in the verticals that we cover, from cannabis and psychedelics to cryptos and NFTs and sports wagering. So if you want to learn more, make sure to click on that bell for all notifications, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.